Comedian Dusty Slay is on a nationwide tour, and we had the opportunity to spend some time with him. And I got to be honest with you, this guy is exactly what you think he is. I know because I grew up in a trailer just like he did. We really bonded. You'll love this guy.
We always have an odd one in the crowd.
So it's kind of odd.
Decidedly odd.
Doesn't that strike you as a little bit odd?
No, that doesn't strike me as a little bit odd.
It's the Bob and Sheri Oddcast with stuff we wouldn't, couldn't, or shouldn't do on the regular show. Now, here's the Oddcast.
I hate tucking in my shirt. I do hate it. I got a weird body for tucking in my shirt. Like, my body's not weird, but I feel like if I tuck in my shirt, I feel like I look like I work everywhere I'm at. Like, that may not make sense to you, but I got like a working man's midsection. Like, if you can see my belt up here, you're like, oh no, he works here somehow. It's not clear what he does, but he is affiliated with the place. He got some keys, I'll tell you that. You know what I mean? Like, if I tuck in my shirt and I go into the grocery store, people start asking me where the bread is. And then I take them to the bread. And it gets weird when they find out I don't work there. I'm like, you didn't ask me if I worked here, you asked me if I knew where the bread was. I do know where the bread is, you know what I mean? I know where a lot of stuff's at in this store. It'd be cool, I'll show you around a bit. Let me see your list, you know what I mean? Okay, we're having a good time, and
Oh, we are such fans of the comedian Dusty Slay, and guess who's joining us right now? That's right, it's Dusty Slay. Welcome to the show.
Hey,
all right,
Dusty.
thanks for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
So my wife and I spent the summer, because her family goes back many, many years in Charleston, in that beautiful city, and had a great time. And that's where you grew up?
Well, you know, I grew up in Alabama, but I spent 10 years in Charleston. I moved to Charleston when I was 21, and I spent 10 years there.
Yeah, and you started comedy there, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a lot of ways in Charleston, but yeah, I loved it there. I love Charleston. Started comedy there, started becoming an alcoholic and quit drinking there. And you know,
That's a lot of things going on.
yeah.
And you won the Charleston stand-up comedy competition 2 years in a row. And I'm just going to guess, in the act, I don't know way back then, but did you make any mention of all the bridesmaids that are always floating around Charleston?
No, I mean, you know, I'm never really much of a topical comic. And, you know, I don't even remember what I was talking about back then, but
Right.
I was just doing, you know, weird kind of jokes. I always like to just do jokes about myself for the most
Right.
part, because then no one's offended.
Right.
And I was doing a lot of absurd type jokes. I mean, I remember one joke I was doing, I say, I don't like to run. Matter of fact, if you see me running, I'd appreciate it if you'd stop and pick me up, you know? I'm probably in some kind of trouble.
So, Dusty, let's talk a little bit about where you come from. You come from Opelika, Alabama, and we know that part of the country pretty well. And you talk a lot about your upbringing, you know, as a kid. And one of the funnier things that I've heard you say was that your mom would pour milk into a bowl and then call y'all in for ice cream and tell you, oh, it melted, you're too late. Like, that's exactly the kind of detail a lot of us with that kind of upbringing can relate to. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, you know, yeah, I mean, I grew up in a trailer park. My parents got divorced when I was 2 or 3, and I lived in a trailer park with my mom. And, you know, the truth is we did eat ice cream, but we were pretty poor. And when I wrote that joke, I just thought, what's the poorest thing I could possibly think of? And that to me sounded really funny. But my mom loves ice cream. She has the worst diet of anybody I know and is pretty healthy despite that. I don't know how she does it. I mean, I have terrible digestion from the way I grew up. I used to drink a lot of room temperature Sam's Colas. My mom worked third shift and she'd keep them under her bed, and I'd go in there and wake her up about 4 times a day to get another Sam's Coke, you know. But I loved it. I had a great childhood. I loved growing up in the trailer park. I was the only, I had a skateboard, and everybody was jealous that I had a skateboard, but nobody got to ride it because we lived on a dirt road. Tough to ride a skateboard on a dirt road.
I can go with that. I grew up in a trailer too. We weren't in a park, but we're in the side of my grandfather's house. And I remember one Christmas, my mom got me a skateboard. We lived in a dirt lot. Everything was dirt. I mean, that was it. There was no pavement. You'd have to drive 5 miles to get to pavement. And I'm like, where am I riding this? And so we lived in a single wide trailer. So I would clear everything out and I'd go up and down the hall between the two beds in the bathroom, back and forth. That was all I could do because I couldn't do anything else with it. So yeah, I know.
Yeah, our trailer was always a little too cluttered for that sort of thing, but I'd get on my back and ride it a little bit like I was a mechanic, you know?
So Dusty, when did you, like, at what point did you announce to your mom and your dad and your sisters that you were fixing to be a stand-up comedian as a grown-up?
Well, I moved to Charleston and they had all still lived in Alabama, and as far as they knew, I was selling pesticides and drinking all the time. So I would come home and visit and I would just drink a lot and it was a party. We had a good time. So I don't know that they really even had a lot of high expectations for me. They just assumed this is what I would do. I would just continue to be a pesticide salesman and drink. And I think initially when I told them that I was going to quit my job, I think they were a little shocked by that, where they were like, because I didn't go to college. So I think they thought, well, this might be the best job you're ever going to get. Maybe don't quit that job.
Right.
But once I did, and I started pursuing comedy, I don't know that they had really much to say because they weren't giving me a lot of guidance either. So I think they were like, well, let's just kind of see where he goes with this. And then it took several years for my dad, but once he saw me at the Opry, it wasn't even the Tonight Show that did it. Once he saw me do the Grand Old Opry, I think he was like, all right, he's got it now,
Was he in the audience, Dusty?
He was in the audience. On my Opry debut, I brought my dad up to see that show because I think the last show he had saw before that was in Columbus, Georgia, and I bombed pretty bad. So I wanted him to see how it had improved.
And
what was his reaction? What was that moment when you finished the set and you saw your father right after that?
Well, he loved it. He was so pumped. I mean, he brought his best friend up with him. His best friend had said it was on his bucket list to just go to the Grand Old Opry. So,
right.
And this is a guy I had known my whole life. He's my dad's best friend. And so I think it was just a really a twofold type thing where it's like, I get to help my best friend knock a thing off his bucket list and while seeing my son do the Opry. So I think it was just a big moment.
I bet.
And weren't you the youngest comedian ever to perform at the Grand Old Opry at that point? I mean, that had to be a pretty big moment for you and your dad.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I mean, the Opry's exciting. I mean, we're lifelong country fans, and it's just, I mean, to know that the people that have come across that stage, and I never really thought I'd get to do the Opry because I do comedy and not music, so I never really thought I'd get to do it. And now, honestly, now I've done it close to 40 times. I mean, it was
have you?
It was a success.
Wow.
And they like me at the Opry, and I've gotten to do it quite a few times now, and it's just fun to be really accepted by the Opry family like that.
What was the venue, Dusty, that you're backstage and you said to yourself, "Wow, I'm going to be going out on this stage. I can't believe it." Was there one place that you played where you felt that? Could be TV, could be just a venue.
Well, I mean, late nights really do that to you. I mean, it's like my first late night was Jimmy Kimmel, and that was a big deal. But it's like the Jimmy Kimmel show doesn't have like a real long history. So even though that was my first one, I would say it was the Tonight Show, which was my second late night. which really was like, I mean, I was so nervous. I think the booker for the Tonight Show was worried that he had made a mistake because he was like, "You're fine, dude. You're going to be fine." And I was like, I was just so nervous because I'm like, the Tonight Show has this long history.
Sure.
And it's also like, you know, everybody's going to see me do comedy now. So if this doesn't go well, that's what they're going to see. Jimmy Kimmel didn't necessarily go the way I wanted it to go. It was okay. But the Tonight Show, I'm like, this is a really big deal. And if this doesn't go well, everybody's going to see this not go well. And that's ended up being the best late night I've done. I mean, I've done a Tonight Show 4 times now. And the other 3 were all good. I like them all. But that first one was the one that really did it for me. And I got management, I got an agent, all out of that Tonight Show. I mean, it was a huge deal.
You kind of answered my question because I was going to ask, at what point did you go, okay, I think I'm a real deal working comedian and I can stop selling pesticides? Was it around the Tonight Show when all of those things started happening?
Oh, no, I quit. I didn't do the Tonight Show until 2018, and I stopped selling pesticides in 2012. I just quit that job and went back to waiting tables, and I was just like, I need to, if I'm going to do comedy, I need to really take it serious. It needs to be my main focus. I've been doing comedy for 6 years as a pesticide salesman, and I'm like, I can't, I can't keep doing comedy part-time only if it's going to be my career,
Yeah.
I had another comedian tell me once, Dusty, that if comedy's your plan A, there comes a moment when you have to let go of plan B if you have any shot whatsoever of making it. And that sounds exactly like what happened to you. You went, it's one or the other. I got to give it my all.
Yeah, I mean, for 6 years doing comedy, I'd never done a comedy club. Charleston, there was no club. So we were doing bar shows, and I had an improv theater where I was doing comedy. And so in 2013, I started to venture out and do some open mics at clubs. I'd go to other cities. And the Charlotte Comedy Zone actually is where I started doing these contests. They had a contest called Fight Night, where if you win the competition, you get a weekend of featuring. You get to feature a weekend. So I won that competition, and I got to do a feature weekend for Josh Blue at the Charlotte Comedy Zone. My first weekend doing comedy was at the Charlotte Comedy Zone. And then there was another comedy contest there called Almost Famous. And I won that contest, and that I got another feature weekend I forget, it was another North Carolina club, but I forget. I don't think it's open anymore. It was a Comedy Zone, but I don't think it's open anymore. And then and so through that, the Comedy Zone, which is franchised out, started to give me more weekends. And I remember one of my first weekends was at the Johnson City Comedy Zone. And I bombed really bad all weekend. And it never occurred to me that this might not be my career. I just said, all right, I got to figure this out. I'm bombing now on the road a little bit. I'm not used to this, but I got to figure it out.
How did you figure it out? If you had good nights, great nights, and then off nights, how do you step back and look at your act and say, what am I going to do with this? Do you just take a joke out? How does that work?
Well, it's like, I think there are different kinds of rooms, right? There's like more of this cool, hip type room, and then there's like a real road gig.
Yeah.
And Charleston was like only cool, hip gigs, right? Where it's like, you just, I don't know, it's just a certain style, a way to go about a joke, the way you tell a joke versus how you would do it on the road. And it's just a different vibe, right? And so I had to just figure out how do I, and if you become really good on the road, a lot of people will, they'll say you kind of, they'll say you become kind of hack is what they'll say. They'll say, oh, you're too road. You're kind of hack now.
Really?
And
This is the wait, Dusty. We've never had a comic
I've never
explain
heard
this
that.
to us.
Yeah, what does
so
that mean?
Wouldn't being good on the road be kind of awesome? What do they mean by it's hack?
well, I think that it's this thing where it's like, I don't know. It's just a thing that people say. It's a thing that, like, the hit people in the open mic will say, in the open mic scene will say, "Oh, you're like a road comic now." But you're right, though. That is what you want. You want to be a road comic, but I think there's this fine line where you want to be able to be good on the road, but also when you go into the city and you do some cool hip room, you also want to be good in there, because it's like you play into the back of the room. They say, you're playing to the comics. Like, you want to be able to make regular people in a comedy club laugh, but you also want to be able to make the comics laugh. That's what I've always wanted to do. I wanted to be able to do both. And it's like in the classroom, growing up, it's like I always felt like I was able to make the class laugh, but I also could make the teacher laugh,
Oh, yeah.
That's what to me, that's what I want to be able to do. I want to do comedy for everyone. So I started figuring that out. I just started, working on different jokes and doing different things and finding ways to make the people on the road laugh. But also if I was hanging back in Nashville doing an open mic, could I still make that room laugh? And I just think it comes from doing as many different types of rooms as possible. Like in Charleston, I used to try to open for my buddies' bands because those are really hard rooms. Most of the time, people going to see music don't want to see comedy.
Right.
So you just try to work all those muscles possible. And you're up there on stage and you do this joke. It doesn't work. You go, okay, this kind of joke's not going to work for this room. I'm going to switch into this gear,
Where is the worst place you got booked into?
I could say easily it was another gig. Now, I've done so many bad gigs, but I can tell you there was another gig I did one time in Charlotte. There was I forget what beer company it was, but it was whatever one owns Red's Apple Ale. But this beer company had rented a convention center, and they had a giant convention room, and every brand of beer they had their own little booth. And Red's Apple Ale was leaning into comedy stuff. So they wanted a comic to do their booth. And I'm in between. One booth is a DJ, and the other booth is like a dunking booth. And I'm in between. I'm up on a really high platform behind the bartenders. So the bartenders are these really young, attractive girls serving Red's Apple Ale, and I'm behind them with a wireless microphone doing comedy. And I'm supposed to do three separate 30-minute sets.
Woo.
And it was so bad that I remember asking the bartenders, I go, "Who's your favorite comic?" And they go, "Kevin Hart." And I thought, oh, okay. And I was very
tough crowd.
Yeah, I was very slow paced back then. And I was like, oh, okay, well, you're not going to like this then. And so I'm behind two girls who I figure don't like what I'm doing anyway. And then the audience doesn't even know what I'm doing. There's no audience. There's people just walking around getting samples of beer. One lady walked up and goes, "What are you doing back there?" I said, "I'm singing."
Oh, Dusty. I have such admiration for comedians because it takes so much courage to get out there. I mean, you have such great success now with Netflix and you're filling concert halls all over the country. But how do you just handle a moment like that? It's like you're an armadillo with armor.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is like, and to me now, I would say that pay was not very good, but at the time, it was really good pay for me. I mean, I was driving 7-8 hours to make $270 in a weekend. Right. So I'm like, and I want to say that gig paid me $1,000. So I was I mean, I'll take at that time. I mean, I was pretty broke. I mean, I would have almost taken any level of embarrassment for $1,000. And then it was also, it was set up by the Comedy Zone, the Charlotte Comedy Zone. So it was like, I got that, and then I got a feature weekend. So it was like, they were like, if you come into town, you do this gig, and then we'll let you feature at the club all weekend. So, it was worth it to me at the time. And it's one of those things where you kind of roll into certain gigs knowing that they are going to be a certain kind of way. So you just prepare yourself. There was no real way to prepare for that gig because I had no idea that it would be that bad. But, you just walk out of there. I mean, I've had many corporate gigs like that, especially before I got an agent. Now my agent really knows how to set these up. But, I did a gig in Huntsville where I'm doing I'm doing comedy for a company's lunch break. They don't even know there's going to be comedy, and they're coming in there to eat lunch, and they're sitting at these round tables. I've got a wireless mic. I'm coming through the speakers in the ceiling, and they're all trying to eat lunch at a buffet, and I'm trying to do jokes. I was supposed to do 45 minutes. I'm on stage, and as people start to finish their lunch, they just start leaving. And I do comedy until there's no one else left in that room except the guy paying me and the staff cleaning up.
Oh, no. Because you can't cut the set. You can't cut the set. Yeah.
Exactly.
If you bail early, you don't get paid, do you?
Right. I go, no, I'm doing my time. And the guy paying me is still there watching, and he's having a good time. And he's the only one. But at some point in the set, you can just check out in a way. You go, I know that, because I can talk all day. So it doesn't matter to me. Once everybody's checked out, I can just talk, I can make fun of the room. I can talk about people cleaning up, At some point, you can just check out and you go, you know what? This is what it is. I'm about to work on some new jokes.
So
that
Dusty,
is what I
you're
think
the
that's
first,
what it takes.
Dusty, you're the first comic we've ever chatted with who had to compete with a salad bar and a dunking booth, which is very unusual. And I want to ask you, because you said that before the Grand Old Opry, you had a night in Columbus, Georgia, which is a town we know really well, where you bombed. And so I want to ask you, I've always been curious, like, what is it about one night, everything is great, and then the next, it's a bomb? And you are still you, and you haven't changed. Is it the audience vibe? Is it what is it? What makes that happen, do you think?
Well, I don't know. It can be anything, because the interesting thing about that Columbus, Georgia gig is that was a place called The Loft, which was a very nice place. And I think mainly a music venue, but a very nice room. And I was there one year, and I started doing these jokes. I call these jokes my lotion jokes, and they were a little dirty for me. I would never do these kind of jokes now, but even then they were pretty clean for the type of material that it was. And, and I remember my dad always wants me to be super clean. So my dad showed up to watch this, but the show was sold out. So he couldn't get a seat, but him and his cousin were able to slip in the back and just watch a little bit of the set. And I was doing this lotion joke. And this lotion joke was just murdering the room. And then I asked my dad later about it. He goes, oh, no, it was really funny. It's a great joke. And so the next year, I'm back at the Loft. He got tickets this time, and they're in their seats. And for whatever reason, just none of my jokes were doing well. And on the road, like I say, there's certain jokes that work, certain jokes that don't work. And the lotion jokes were my real hits. Like, if it was going bad, I could jump into those jokes because they're a little dirtier, and it would win the audience back. But for whatever reason, this night I hit those lotion jokes, and it seemed to just sink me even lower. And my dad is there.
Oh, no.
My dad is there with his wife, his cousin, his wife, a couple of people from their church.
Oh, no, not the church people.
And I'm just doing for me, really dirty jokes. I mean, for the comic after me, that would have been clean for him. But for me, it was really dirty. and I'm just bombing. And then my dad hated those jokes. I mean, he hated them. And I don't think we talked about comedy for a long time after that until he did come see me at the Opry.
Oh, wow.
Can
So
you
I'm-
give us a little idea of what
Yeah.
the lotion jokes were? I mean,
Well,
I mean, I'm
I
guessing
had-
it's not about moisturizing, right? Like,
No, I had a joke where, and I like this joke a lot, but I had a joke where I said, I saw a young comic on stage recently, and he was talking about watching, adult films or porn, as you would call it. And he said he was really complaining about how slow the download speeds were. And it really blew me away that the first time this guy watched porn was on the internet, because I know the first time I watched it, it was on a VHS tape. And my biggest complaint was having to rewind it back to the place where my dad left it at.
I think we know why your dad didn't like that joke.
Amen. Yeah, I can see that. Oh, that is so funny.
So then,
Yeah, he went back to
so then
share
I
that
would
with
go
his small
into,
group.
yeah, and then I would go into some jokes, just about lotion and that sort of thing. But I never got real dirty with it. I mean, I think in some of the jokes I don't even remember, but I think it was like, if you're using lotion, you got to make sure to spread it around to both hands, because eventually one hand will be all moisturized and the other one's all dry.
Okay. Got it.
But these are just jokes. I mean, I'm just making up silly things. And, but it would be really funny for the audience. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, even for a radio interview, it's really awkward to say that sort of thing. But on stage, when the audience is rolling, it's like, it's all fun and games,
Sure,
But
sure.
a joke like that, when they're not laughing, it sounds like some kind of weird confessional thing you're doing. You're like, I'm actually just making this up. There's really no truth in this. I don't think that.
Yeah. So let me ask you.
People giving you the side eye, like he looks
Yeah.
like the kind of guy that would,
Let me
Nobody's
ask
shaking
you.
hands at the end of the set.
Right. And I think part of the joke too was like as a man, you can't even own a bottle of lotion without people thinking that's what you're doing. Women, you go in and you're like, oh, you've been moisturizing. You see a bottle of lotion in a guy's room, you're like, oh, what a sicko, And I'm like, I got dry elbows,
Dusty, let me ask you, once the Netflix thing hit and once the concert halls were being filled and you had made it, who was the celebrity that you might have been introduced to that you just said to yourself, wow, I'm meeting so-and-so?
There's been a couple. I mean, Jeff Foxworthy, Larry the Cable Guy were definitely like that for me. I mean, they're it's like, I actually got to spend time with Larry the Cable Guy. I did a one show with him, which didn't go particularly well for me. I think everybody thought Larry the Cable Guy's audience would be my audience, but I'm sure there's some, but for the most part, I don't think that's the case. But me and him hung out after the show. We had a cigar together and we got to hang and talk for a while. And I really, got to know him as a person, and I like him a lot. He's a very nice guy. I think, a real true celebrity, though, that did that for me is David Spade. I got to do David Spade's show Lights Out a couple of times. And since then, I text with David Spade a little bit. I've done recently did his podcast with Dana Carvey. And I think, for me, it's like, the early 2000s at the restaurant I worked at, I think we quoted Joe Dirt more than any other movie ever. And just to be able to hang out with David Spade is, really
He's a really
something.
funny guy. We've had him on the show, and he told a funny story. He said that he was, at this point in his life, he was a little out of shape, but he wanted to take, I don't know if it was a girlfriend or a wife or whoever, to a beach in Los Angeles.
He was dating a famous actress that the paparazzi always stalked.
Always
Oh,
followed.
okay.
And I think they went to Zuma Beach, and he took his shirt off, and he was saying to himself, well, I don't see any of them around. I think I'm all right. And he said, and then I heard click.
Oh, no.
And, and it shows up in People magazine.
Oh, gosh.
So,
Well,
you went from, selling pesticides and opening for your buddies' bands, and now you're doing like a big national tour. So, do you, what is the most like diva obnoxious thing you've demanded, Dusty, now that you're like really in the top tier of comedians?
I don't know that I've really demanded anything. I still, I'm still, one thing I like, and I feel like sometimes people think it's that kind of thing, but like if I'm doing a club or any kind of venue, I want a back door to go in. I don't want to go in the same door that everybody coming to my show is going in through. And
That
I don't
seems
think it's
reasonable.
yeah, I think because mainly for me, I think it ruins it for the audience. They're coming to see me and I'm walking through the same door they're walking through. I just think it ruins it. Now, with theaters, it's never a problem. But there are some clubs where it's like, there's no, I'm like, I'm walking through the front door and I'm like, I zip through really fast, but I'm like, I don't know. It just feels like it kind of ruins part of the show.
Yeah.
And then
I agree.
I also, there's some clubs, and I think they're all gone now. I think they've added these, but there were clubs that didn't have green rooms. And I'm like, I used to do those all the time. And I would sit in the back of the room because nobody really knew who I was anyway. So it didn't make any difference. But it's like now I'm like, I can't do a club where there's no green room,
Right.
But I think most of those clubs have added green rooms. So that's nice. But I don't know that I really, sometimes I try to eat healthy. I've read that inorganic fruit has so much going on with it that it's actually not good for you and not even worth eating. So I think when they ask me sometimes the theaters will be like, well, what kind of food can we get you? And I always feel like I feel so weird, but I go, can you get some organic fruit? And I don't know what it is about asking for organic fruit that makes me feel like a diva, but I just, I think that may be the thing.
Those clubs are probably like, Dusty wanted an organic peach. We thought he was going to get him some potted meat and crackers. There's this idea, right?
But it's like, and that is the thing, but that's what's weird to me, right? My dad lives on a farm. My parents were divorced. I live with my mom in a trailer, but my dad lives on a farm. It's not some fancy farm. His dad built the house he lives in 1947, but he had an apple orchard that his dad planted. So he had apple trees, he had a pear tree, he had figs, blackberries. So all growing up, that's what I ate living in the country. I would pick apples and pears and plums and figs right off the tree and eat it. And all of this was organic fruit, but we didn't call it that back then. It was just fruit back then. But nobody was spraying pesticides on it,
Yeah.
And we weren't fertilizing it. We weren't even taking care of the trees. In fact, my dad has now bulldozed all those trees to the ground. But
no.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't make sense to me either, but he has done it.
Your father has got to be so proud of you at this point.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think either proud of me or proud of himself for raising me. But either way.
Either way works.
Yeah.
As long as we keep the lotion jokes out of it when he brings his church friends to see you perform.
Yeah. Well, it was just, I don't know. My dad, yeah. I don't think my dad cares. I don't think my dad cares so much about it. He cares more about, the appearance of it. Right. So it was his cousin's church friends. So he's like, but I really believe, I believe this. If those jokes had crushed that night, I don't think he would have cared at all about it. But the fact that they bombed, it was like confirmation for him. Like, I told you to be clean. Told you to be clean. And then but I am appreciative that he kind of instilled that in me because I like being clean for a lot of reasons. One, I can do a lot of corporate events because I'm clean and I don't have to worry about really changing up much material. But also, I now have the kind of show, and I've had several people tell me this, like older adults will say, thank you for having the kind of comedy that I can bring my kids to. Now, I don't think I have the kind of comedy for small children, but adult kids, like someone can bring their 20-year-old kids to my show and they can all have a good time. You can, if you're, you can bring your parents to my show, and you're all going to have a good time, because it's not going to be the kind of comedy that's going to embarrass you. You're not going to be cringing. It's not squeaky clean, but it's pretty clean.
Right.
Well, Dusty, we're having a good time, and we are so glad that you were able to carve out some of that to chat with us. Dusty is touring the country, and we will post his night shift tour itinerary up on our website so that you can find when he's coming to a town near you. And we're such fans. We have played a lot of your comedy sets. We do a daily feature where we showcase a comedian, and we have featured a lot of your stuff. We're so thrilled for your success, and we were delighted to have a chance to chat with you. So thanks for coming by.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you doing that. And, Charlotte always has, I don't know, it's always been a special place for me, because I didn't get my start in Charlotte, but I got my start working the road in Charlotte, and I'm happy to be coming back. I don't know. I have not been booked there a lot, but I got a ton of friends there. I'm very excited about it. So I appreciate you guys.
Terrific.
I know you're
Continued
on a lot of
success.
different radio stations, but I know you're in Charlotte too. So I appreciate it.
We have friends at Comedy Zone.
We're thrilled that the Comedy Zone in the Queen City helped launch your road career, because every little thing brought you to where you are now, and it's pretty spectacular. So thank you, Dusty Slay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You can find tickets and tour information for Dusty at dustyslay.com. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Oddcast. We do it every Monday, and we appreciate you, because you're the people we're making it for. Otherwise, we really are talking to ourselves, and that's our worst fear. We'll see you on the next Oddcast.